My mom mentioned a little earlier, for anyone who was paying attention, she was the youngest of her 4 siblings by 12 years, I believe, 12. So naturally that meant myself, my sister, and my 2 younger siblings, we were the youngest of the grandchildren. We kind of brought up the rear end. Growing up, it was a little hard for me, especially hearing some of the speeches of my cousins. They kind of had this full, long childhood and adolescence with their vibrant, younger Bobby. And for me, it was tough. Obviously I had those childhood moments, but it was hard to see her get old before I was ready for it. I was still young, and I was spoiled so much by my other grandparents that I didn't want my Bobby to get old so fast, because she spoiled me so much too. So it was really hard for me. And I think as the years have passed, I've kind of learned that, looking back, what I thought was something negative, it was truly a blessing in disguise. I think because a lot of the other grandchildren, the cousins, my older cousins, they were kind of clumped together in age groups. There were twins here, and then these 2 cousins were the same age, and then there were kind of 10 or 11, I don't know how many grandchildren that were kind of all within this 6-year gap. And for myself and Alexa, and then later Sammy and Sophia, we were later. I think the next closest grandchild or cousin to me is 6 or 7 years my elder. So we didn't have to share Bobby. We got her to ourselves. I remember my mom used to drop us off at Bobby's house, and it was just me and Bobby. I didn't have any other cousins to contend with. I didn't have anyone else that, she had to split her time on. All the other cousins were older. They were in high school. I was just this little boy. I was her little tatala. And those days where my mom would drop me off at Bobby's house after school, I would do homework, or she would come over to our house and I would get to spend time with her. Those were some of my best memories from growing up. And a couple of things, I know when you're younger, kind of the memories get a little fuzzy. I was young. I was 5, 6. But there were a couple of things that stood out to me from those days, those after school days, or those weekends that I got to spend alone with my Bobby, that I just wanted to touch upon here. The first thing was I had a very special connection with my Bobby. I know all the grandchildren did, and that's really what made her so unique, is that she had such a special bond with each and every one of us. But right when I would pull up to her house, she would be standing on her porch, as always. She would never make us come inside. And I would jet out of the car, shoot up the stairs. She would give me a big hug, the fierce hug that Ari spoke about. And she would squeeze me tight. She would pinch my cheeks so hard I thought they were going to fall off. And she would say, "My little Baruch David." Baruch David was her grandfather's name. And that's my name as well, my Hebrew name. And I remember one of the things I remember most about those days with Bobby is she would sit me down on her lap and she would tell me stories from her childhood, of her siblings, her brothers, her sisters, her cousins. And most of all, she would tell me stories of her Baruch David, her grandfather. And she would tell me how much I reminded her of him, how he was so smart, I was so smart, supposedly, how he was so funny, I was so funny. And I remember looking in her eyes. I think Dunny mentioned someone, I don't know who it was, but she had a glisten to her eyes. I could see I wasn't just a little boy sitting with his elderly grandmother who was telling him stories. I was looking into the eyes of a little girl sitting with her grandfather. And that was such a special bond that we shared. And I remember years later when she would tell me stories, the horrific stories, the horrible death, and everything that happened to her, the infamous cattle car story. And I would think to myself, how is it possible that someone who went through this would be able to come out so strong on the other side? And I would always think back to those stories that she would tell me when I was younger, when I was sitting on her lap in her house. And just, I would remember the glow in her eyes talking about her family and her grandfather. And I would know that that is a type of bond that could never be broken. And she was literally unbreakable. And that's the type of bond that she had with me and with all of her grandchildren. And for that, I'm forever grateful. Another thing that I wanted to talk about that I remember a lot from those trips to Bobby and Zadie's house were Bobby and Zadie. They had such a special connection. It was so, Uncle Zevi spoke about it a little bit. It wasn't just love. It was something so much deeper. He truly felt like she saved him, and she felt like he saved her. And I remember just being in awe of the two of them and how happy they were together. And I remember when my Zadie was nifter 17 years ago, I was 9 years old, and I loved my Zadie so much. I was inconsolable. You could ask my father. There were weeks where he would come up to my room in the middle of the night, 9 years old, and I would just be crying in my bed. And he would try to console me, and it's okay. Everything's going to be okay. This is what happens in life. Obviously, I was young. I didn't have much experience with death and what comes next. And, you know, I was really just learning all of it. And he would say, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay. And I remember a thought that used to keep going through my head was, how is this okay? My Bobby's never going to get to see my Zadie again. That's not fair. And last night when we heard the news, obviously, I was very sad, but it made me so happy to think that my Bobby is going to get to see my Zadie again. So I just wanted to, before I wrap up, share a few memories, just some stories about my Bobby and what a special woman she was. Some of my favorite memories with her. I remember I went to Florida to visit her one time, and I must have been 16, 17 years old at most. And anyone who went to Bobby's Florida apartment knows how it looks. There's the living area in the front, and then there are 2 bedrooms in the back. Hers is on the right. And on the left, there's kind of a guest room with a couch that you could pull out as a bed. And when I got there, Bobby said to me, do you want to sleep on the couch as a couch, or do you want to pull it out as a bed? And I said, you know what, I think I'll pull it out as a bed. So I started taking the cushions off to pull it out. And she goes, what are you doing? And I go, what? I'm pulling the bed out. She goes, no grandson of mine is going to lift a finger in this house. And keep in mind, she was 80 something. And I was like 15 years old. She made her aide come do it. I felt so bad. I had to get up early the next morning to put the bed away so the aide wouldn't have to do it again. But that's just the kind of woman she was and the kind of love she had for all of us. As Ari mentioned, at the end of the day, she was this historic, larger than life figure. And yet she was still our grandmother. And it was moments like that that made us love her so deeply. One other thing I wanted to mention, one story before I let you guys move on. When probably my favorite time that I got to spend with Bobby was I was a senior in high school, and during those days, Bobby would spend most of her year in Florida, but she would come up around Pesach time and spend some time with the family. She would spend summers in Beaver Lake. She would spend the time before that with us, either in Far Rockaway, in Lawrence, whatever it was. And it was around that time, Bobby was up, I was in 12th grade. I got into a little bit of trouble, and my parents punished me, as parents of high schoolers do. And my big punishment was that my car was taken away. I wasn't allowed to use it. Me being the conniving negotiator that I am, I went to my mom and I said, come on, let's work out a deal. I need the car. You don't want me around all the time. You don't want to have to chauffeur me. So let's figure something out. So my mom thought about it and she got back to me and she said, okay, here's what I'll do. I'll let you keep the car, but you have to drive Bobby wherever she goes, wherever she needs to go, whether that's the doctor, to get her hair done. You have to be her personal chauffeur. And I said, wow, what a deal. I get my car and I get to spend time with my Bobby. So of course I accepted. And those were some of my favorite times that I got to spend with my Bobby, where I really got to know the Bobby that everyone else has spoken about, this tough, smart, funny woman. We would go on these drives through Far Rockaway. She would shout at jaywalkers. She would make fun of my fakakta rap music. And it was in those times that I really got to spend the best kind of time with her. And at the end of the drive, as I'm sure the other grandchildren will know this is coming, but at the end of the drive, I would pull her into her house, and she would lift something up on my dashboard and slide her hand under there. And I would say, Bobby, what are you doing? She would go, just a couple of bucks for gas money. I would say, Bobby, you really don't have to do that. I use my mom's credit card for gas money. But she would say, could just a couple of bucks, buy yourself something nice. So of course, I would walk her into her house, and I would go back into the car. I would check the couple of bucks, expecting $5, maybe $10. I feel bad for anybody who got 20, because there were usually $200, $300 there. And so, yeah, I mean, she was just always looking out for me and making sure I had just a couple of bucks to make sure I was okay. Last night, the last night of Hanukkah, I got home, and my mom had already gone to sleep. The menorah was set up for me to light. I lit candles, and I noticed next to the menorah a small envelope from my Uncle Zev and Aunt Rivki with some Hanukkah gelt in it. Just a couple of bucks. I opened it, I put it down, didn't think about it until later. About an hour later, we got the call of the news. We went to Uncle Zevi and Aunt Rivki for a little bit. We came home later. Obviously, I was devastated, a lot of emotions going through my head. And I looked out on the night table. This woman who I thought would outlive us all, she wouldn't leave until she knew I had a couple of bucks to make sure I was okay. And then it was time for her to go. Bobby, I'm so happy that you finally get to rest, that you get to be with your family, that you get to be with Zadie. I know that when you see your Baruch David, your grandfather, you're going to tell him the stories of what you've accomplished, and you're going to bring him as much nachas as you always said, I brought you. I love you.